Welcome to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. Is justice handed down equally to people in this country? Or is justice like an elegant automobile? If you have the money, you can get it. We say that everyone should be treated the same in America, but is that how it really works? Lots of questions today, and here to help us shape our conversation are two people that deal with this issue every day. Let's meet Renee Hatcher, who is the director of the INWIN project, and Judith Stanton, the former executive director for Northwest Indiana Volunteer Lawyers. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith.
So I think we've got some really interesting things to talk about today. Did I set the stage right for this, you think?
It works for me.
I think so, certainly.
So tell me, first of all, you're no longer involved with this project, but you did this for how many years?
14.
14 years.
And
okay.
before that, I had spent 15 years as a legal aid attorney.
Okay.
And had a private practice in between.
And the INWIN project, what is that, Renee?
So the INWIN project is a project that I spearheaded in 2012, and essentially it provides free legal services to individuals, nonprofits, and small businesses in Northwest Indiana to help increase access to opportunities. So we do nonprofit law, we help small businesses get started with their legal needs, and we also provide expungement services for individuals who are having a hard time transitioning back and accessing opportunities because of a previous criminal record.
I've got an interesting question for both of you here. Why did you become an attorney? Why did both of you become an attorney?
That's an interesting question. I didn't even think of being an attorney until I was 37 years old and had 5 kids. But I had been active in the community, and I was interested in issues, sort of advocating on various things. And I read an article in my college's alumni journal, which my college is an all-women's college, St. Mary's at Notre Dame, and they had just started a pre-law group. This was back when women were first really starting to go to law school. And they had a paragraph where they described the kind of things that attorneys, the kind of skills that attorneys do. And I thought, it was actually literally like a light bulb went off in my head that this is what I wanted to do.
See,
Now, I didn't know going in that I was going to be doing this type of law, but the idea of being an attorney, that's how it happened to me. It was really
see,
weird.
if I'd have known you back then, I would have predicted that with 5 kids, you would have probably had a real need for justice or something, you know. I mean, you would have thought, gosh, how do I
probably should have gone to the criminal system at that point.
There you go. So, Renee, how'd that happen for you?
Well, probably similar to Judy, certainly.
You weren't 37, though.
Oh no. But I think in the same way, I was interested in becoming an attorney because I saw it as a way to really advocate for issues that I cared about deeply, and also saw it as a profession where you can really make a lot of good change. You know, attorneys have been at the forefront of the civil rights movement, and in large part, I think that when I was kind of thinking about what I wanted my career to be, I tried to model it after the people I looked up to, and a lot of those individuals, including my father, who was also an attorney, certainly were involved with the civil rights movement and used their skills as attorneys really to push that movement forward.
Wow. So it's interesting. You went into law school probably when there weren't that many women in law school.
Right. About a third of our class were women, but within a couple, 2 or 3 years prior to that, there were only a few. And then, but nowadays, there's lots of women in law school.
Yeah,
I also thought I was going to be the oldest person in the class, which did not prove to be true. I would say half our class had been out of college for 10, 15 years before coming to law school.
Wow, so things have changed a lot for that. But you both have a passion for kind of civil rights and issues where people who really don't have as much, people who are in poverty, people who just don't have resources, really struggle. Is that, I mean, we hear about that all the time. We hear, you know, it's justice doesn't come down for those people. Is that really true?
It's not, in my mind, it's not so much that the justice doesn't happen if they make it to the justice system. The problem I have is that there's so many people that cannot afford an attorney who have really critical civil legal needs. They're losing their kids, they aren't getting their child support, they may be being evicted, they may need a bankruptcy, they may have problems with their public benefits being denied and they need an appeal for that. But if they can't afford an attorney, then our dispute resolution system, which is really what our justice system is isn't available to them. And it's not justice for all if all can't get into the system and have assistance in using it, because it's complicated. It's not a simple system.
But there's all kinds of resources. I mean, a lot of people would look at it and say, but yeah, but there's all kinds of resources they can go and access. Like they could come to you, right, Renee?
Yeah, if they have certain types of problems. So I think, as Judy mentioned, it's really a question of access to justice, and also the idea of what justice is, right? So even if individuals have an attorney, they are still subject sometimes to a system that plays out in different types of ways that doesn't necessarily always produce a just result. And there are resources, but the fact is, Keith, in places like Indiana and states all over this country, that there aren't enough attorneys that are available to service individuals who really need help.
Why is that? It looks to me like everybody would say there's a ton of attorneys around. Why is there not enough attorneys to help these people then?
That's an interesting question, and it's one that I think the law schools struggle with, the system itself struggles with, our court struggles with, trying to encourage people to do this kind of law. But on the other hand, it doesn't necessarily pay as well as a private practice might. People who have families, have student loans. There are disincentives to spending your time doing, we call it public interest law. It can take a variety of, of forms. But we do have an obligation as attorneys, and it's part of our oath as Indiana attorneys, that we pay attention to the needs of people, even those who can't afford our services. So our State Bar Association, a number of years ago, set up an aspirational goal that private attorneys would do at least 50 hours of pro bono work a year. Now, it's not mandatory, they don't have to, but it's a way of recognizing the obligation that we have, because we have the training and the information that is needed by the folks who need this kind of help.
Well, I read a piece the other day, so it's 50 hours. That's a kind of an aspirational statement for them. I think someone told me the other day that there was a research piece that said the average attorney in Indiana particularly was spending about 5 hours. And it's like, wow, I mean, that means that's one person doing 50 and 9 doing nothing, right? So, I mean, that's one way to look at it. I mean, is that how you see it, Renee? I mean, what's wrong with these people not helping?
Well, no, I think as Judy said, certainly, like as a professional in the legal field, we have an obligation to really take that serious, and to take serious the unmet legal needs of the populations that we serve. But the problem for a lot of attorneys, Keith, specifically for solo practitioners that have to maintain the administrative records of their practice. They have a lot of other duties that they have to do in the course of representing clients. They have to collect on their actual paying clients. So they spend a lot of time trying to maintain their practice, and I think often they feel as if they don't necessarily have time to do pro bono. But that said, I certainly think that 50 hours is not a lot to ask of any attorney in any position, whether they're at a large firm or whether they're a solo practitioner. And I think what it really is going to take to change some of this is really just leadership on the part of the judiciary and for legal professionals in the state of Indiana really to come together and make this a priority in our profession.
A little more of a cultural shift.
Yeah.
Maybe to give our viewers some perspective of this, could each of you maybe share a story about where you feel like here was someone or a family or something where they just were really struggling and just didn't get the help they need, and in the end really lost out? I mean.
Well, my stories are more the ones that we actually helped. Our program handles a lot of cases that involve someone who's a victim of domestic violence. And we spend a lot of time, sometimes on the phone, just talking with that person and helping them to understand that they have remedies, that there are protective things, that there are resources they can go to, and sort of modeling for them being strong and not letting the person who's been intimidating or abusing them get over on them, if you will. And we always send out, when we had a pro bono case that an attorney did, we always send a little questionnaire out to the client afterwards and ask them if they have any comments. And we have gotten some of the nicest thank yous back from clients who these pro bono attorneys have helped. And one of the things we always do then is send a copy of that to the attorney so that they will know how appreciated they were. But you know, if you're in a domestic violence situation, you don't have any money, you're not working, maybe you're not allowed to work, and yet you need to leave, maybe you have children. What you need is a place to live, you need child support, you need to get this situation over with. And sometimes there are financial resources in the family, but that person doesn't even have access
They have no
to
access,
those.
yeah. You know, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, you guys actually probably work with the people who get help as opposed to the ones who don't. So is that how you kind of see it too? Or do you see, Renee, some of these people who don't get the help?
Well, I would say for the most part, public interest attorneys and organizations that kind of provide these services are stretched very thin, right? So we only have a limited amount of resources, attorneys. We only have a limited amount of pro bono attorneys that are willing to take on these cases. And so a lot of times we can't necessarily serve in ways that would be most helpful for the population and to the extent that we feel like is needed. But that said, I remember when we started doing expungements, for example, for individuals who had some type of previous criminal record. And again, there's a number of collateral consequences to this. So they can't access housing after they serve their sentence. They can't necessarily get public benefits. They have difficult time just trying to find a job because of this record. And so I remember when we first started doing these services, there was an outpour of people who could not afford an attorney because they couldn't get access to a job to actually get their record clear so they could get a job, right? So it becomes this whole cycle. And within the course of maybe 6 to 9 months, we had served 200 people who needed to get their records expunged. And that said, there were still many others that we were unable to serve.
So have you had a situation where you had to say to somebody, I just have nobody who can help you?
Yes.
And
Often.
so,
Or they have to wait a long time until someone is freed up to do it. There was a study done in Indiana, and there have been national studies done on what they call the legal needs of the poor, and identifying folks who would qualify as low income enough to be qualified as poor, and then asking them what, if any, kind of legal problems had they had in the last 12 months. And the sad data is that we're only meeting about 20% of the basic, most important legal needs of the low-income folks in
wow,
this country.
that's incredible.
Now, we try to do other things. We try to have information days where they can come and get a free consultation. The State Bar sponsors one of those every year on the Martin Luther King holiday. We have a statewide, you can go online and ask a question, and attorneys sign up to anonymously answer those legal questions. So we try to do those kinds of things that can at least give them some information.
Is that a Band-Aid on a serious wound, though?
Yeah,
I mean, for somebody to
yeah.
come in for one day in the year and have questions answered and just find out they really need help and then walk away and go, well, that's all I got?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that sounds pretty lousy.
Well, Congress set up the Legal Services Corporation, which is the mechanism that funds the legal aid programs around the country. And when I started in 1980, Congress had just increased the funding so that there could be a legal services program serving every county in the United States. And I started working for what was then Legal Services of Northwest Indiana, was based in Gary. They had just not only had Lake County assigned to them, but also Porter County. And there were 3 of us hired, and we were the 8th, 9th, and 10th attorneys in that office. A couple years later, the administration changed, the funding changed, and within 5 years, we were down to 4 or 5 attorneys, and lost some of our paralegals. And,
Wow.
it hasn't ever gotten back to the level
Where
of
it
funding that it was then, back in that time.
So Renee, how do you say to somebody, I can't help you, or no, we can't do anything for you?
Right, so we try to identify other resources or referrals that they could potentially use, right? And sometimes, again, as Judy, we try to be very thoughtful about the ways in which we could at least increase their information of the process that they need to go through. So sometimes they're manuals, pro se manuals. Sometimes we can represent individuals on a short-term basis if we can resolve something in mediation. But again, it's very difficult. It's very difficult because you also understand as an attorney what the consequences are of the process that they need to go through.
Well, knowing that level of delay or inability for them to get that access, these people got to be pretty frustrated and angry sometimes. So do they sometimes take that out on you? Renee, do you feel like they kind of come after you and say,
Yeah,
you're not helping me?
Well, I think that, the answer is of course, but I think it's more so really trying to get them to understand the current system and structure that the justice system is, right? And so a lot of times, I think they understand that it's not necessarily that I don't want to help them. I think they really understand that this is a structural issue around the justice system.
So what do you say, Judy, when they say the system is horrible? The system is set up for me to fail. The system is set up to not help me.
That's a frustrating day for me, because what we try to do is give them as much information as we can, explain as much as we can. We do a lot of hand-holding by telephone with people that aren't yet represented by anybody, but just kind of walking them through wherever they are. And you just kind of hope that if they can hear in your voice how much you really care about their problem and how much you share their frustration, I think people respond to that. And so it's really rare that they might be expressing their frustration, but they're not necessarily mad at us. At least I hope not.
I find myself wanting to role play with you here and go, it's nice you really care about me, but you haven't solved my problem. I'm still getting kicked out of my place, or I still can't get a job because I've got a criminal record.
Right.
Yeah.
So why can't you help me, Renee?
Again, Keith, it really comes down to a question of resources, and also what we have to work within the confines of the justice system that we currently have. And
Is the system broke? Do you guys think the system's broke?
I don't think so. I think it's just gotten very complicated. There are all kinds of procedural rules, there's all kinds of forms, there's all kinds of legal principles that are used to decide, to apply the law to facts. And some people can go online and learn a lot about that when people are doing that more and more. But still, if you're going to court, and especially if the other side is represented by someone who knows how things operate, just the procedural stuff, it's really, you're really at a disadvantage. And not everybody is that eloquent on expressing for themselves their side of the case.
That's why you guys are good at what you do. You're both eloquent at doing this. So, but I can just, again, see that frustration with people. You started to have a little different answer when I said, is the system broken?
Yeah.
The look on your face was...
Yeah. So, no, I think that it really depends on what we want our justice system to be and what function we want it to serve, right? So most of what we've been talking about is the civil system, the civil justice system, right? But then there's a whole other side of it with the criminal law justice system. And I think the thing that they have in common is that the majority of Americans have to interact with our justice system in one form or fashion. So whether it's you get a speeding ticket and have to appear in court, or you're going through a custody issue with your child, or a divorce, or an issue with family law, right? So there are a lot of ways in which everyday Americans have to interact with the justice system. And some of the laws that we've created in the criminal justice system, I think, don't necessarily make sense if we really want it to serve a public safety function. And we also want individuals that have been or have done something wrong to be rehabilitated, through our justice system, right? So there's all of, I think, structures in terms of going into court and what that looks like and access to justice. But then beyond that, we have to really take a look at the function of the justice system and some of the laws that I think are in contradiction with that. So I would say that, yeah, the system is broken in a lot of ways, if you ask me, and I can give you concrete examples and overarching examples of that. But at the end of the day, I think we collectively have to decide what function the justice system is supposed to play, and how do we actually make it do that in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, this is actually probably not a criminal justice question, but I still am kind of thrown off by, in today's society, how much information we have. Man, as soon as your picture's on the paper that you've been indicted or accused of something, I mean, it looks to me like we've pretty much already said that these people are guilty. Their picture's there, we make them not smile in the picture. I mean, they look like a pretty bad person. I mean, that itself doesn't seem very fair to me. I mean, what's the impact of that?
Well, information, right, has completely changed, and so that was one of the issues that we had, or that we currently have around criminal records and then collateral consequences. But beyond that, Keith, in terms of our criminal justice system, roughly 95% of cases actually go to a plea. They have some kind of plea agreement with the state and with the individual that is accused. And that is in large part because we don't necessarily have representation for those individuals. So since 1963, individuals have been required to have some type of representation if they are accused of a crime. But that can look like a lot of different things. Oftentimes, public defenders do not necessarily have the time to efficiently investigate a case and actually spend sufficient time on an individual's case. So it most often goes to a plea agreement.
I feel like we just got rolling on this subject, and we're just like, we're at the end of time. So in the last minute, just kind of quickly a piece, what do you wish people knew a little bit more, the general public? What do you wish, a simple message to them that they understood about what's going on with people not having access?
I think there's a bigger context that people need to understand, and that is, what is poverty?
Right.
We hear a whole lot of rhetoric about all these people that would prefer to stay on entitlements and so on and so forth instead of getting a job, without understanding that eligibility for benefits is often based on your income. If you work full-time minimum wage, you may be working full-time, but you may lose your benefits. And those same people are also then in danger of being evicted and whatever, and we don't seem to understand the importance of that.
So it's understanding that real quick from you.
I would actually agree with that we need to think more about how the law intersects with the idea of poverty and how people actually need access to justice if we're going to deal with poverty in a real way. And that extends to the criminal justice system as well as to the civil justice system. And so it's very basic necessities as well as what it really means to be free and making sure that individuals are on a level playing field in our justice system.
And we haven't talked about the economic benefit to the community of getting people.
Which would be another time. So when I get an attorney sometime, I'll get one of you guys. So that's for sure. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. When's the last time you repeated those words? It's not been that long ago for me since I attend public meetings where the pledge is part of the opening ritual. I want to focus on the last few words of that pledge, with liberty and justice for all. Although the pledge was written in 1892 and adopted by Congress in 1942, it has some of the same power inherent in the founding documents of this country. Lofty words, simply scripted, with powerful meaning. Liberty is not too tough of a word to define. Most of us would quickly clarify with the word freedom. Freedom is easy to understand. We know what it's like to be free or not be free to choose or do what we wish. Now, justice, this is a difficult one. When that word is dropped, we think of being fair, right, proper, impartial, or just. What does it mean to take right action, establish fairness, resolve conflict in an equitable way, or judge fairly? As I read through these definitions, it appeared to me that justice and all its friendly cousin words were really about how it was administered. It was about putting the concept into practice. Easy to define, difficult to do. This is why we have judges, juries, and processes for reaching a conclusion as to what is right, fair, or just. Today, we often seem to forget the process and quickly conclude that one individual or another group has reached a conclusion and they are absolutely, without question, correct. I think I now understand why certain people fight harder than others for the process to be fair and impartial. If we seek the answer in a proper way, our conclusion has a much higher probability of being right. This takes a lot of effort and is quite a bit of work. No wonder Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle, the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals." When that occurs, we have a much greater chance of achieving justice for all. As always, I want to hear from you. We welcome your comments and thoughts about the content of this program or what is happening in our communities. You can email us at focus@lakeshorepublicmedia.org or watch past Lakeshore Focus shows from our website, which is www.lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.